is one of the first stories of literature, is that someone leaves home, goes out, and kind of encounters all these obstacles on the road, has to, fight dragons and this sort of thing, and then if they're lucky, finds home again. Like the Odyssey of the Iliad, then you actually come back changed, but you find home. And I think that has pretty much been the basic story for me on some level. And part of writing about family members, it's really rewarding to write about family because you have to create them as real characters on the page, and so you have to understand their history. And so that can be really helpful for understanding why the hell your parents did what it was they did. You have to have some empathy and sympathy for them. You've got to understand what they were coming from. For me, I had to research the 60s and kind of what was going on, what was at stake for my mom to really strike out against her family and against society to do this thing. And so it really helped me personally get all this kind of insight and respect for my parents. My father, who wasn't there, once I realized all the amazing things he was doing to kind of free an entire continent, that was pretty amazing. And so it kind of helped me see them as individuals, which kind of allowed me to go on. And I think kind of once I get that story on the page, I think the thing that you're haunted by is the thing you have to write. Once you get that story down, then maybe you can go to something else. Plus, my mom is just such a great character on the page. She's just so plucky and kind of feisty, and so people really like her, so I like writing about her. My dad is great on the page. I much prefer him on the page than in real life. In real life, he drives me crazy. But I love writing about it. Like interacting with him one-on-one, he's like, but I think that once I finish this book, then I'll move to something else, But again, if you're using yourself, and the thing I get tired about is writing for my own story. That gets kind of tiring. It's like, oh God, not me again. So which is why I try to think about it differently. It's not confessional. I'm not just like, here's everything about faith, but it's like, how are these things metaphors for something larger? This book is about kind of risking and doing something unusual and kind of trying to save yourself. And it's not really about Faith went to Thailand. That's just kind of the metaphor. And then the family story is not just like, oh, I have fascinating parents and I want to write about them, but it's actually about how history and larger events shape family. And so all those kind of larger terms we use actually have these kind of personal ramifications. And so in that sense, I think I'm trying to kind of strike a balance between just being obsessed with my own family history and how it kind of allows me to connect with other people. Yeah.
I have a question about the different editions of the book, the cloth cover and then the paperback. There are changes in the design, and I'm curious as to how you feel about the changes, if you're okay with all of them, or if you have any thoughts on publishers having the authority to go and make those kinds of changes.
Sure.
At will, for marketing purposes.
Sure. I'm actually happy with both. Look, here they are. I'm happy with both versions. I have to say, just physically, the book is just really beautiful. Most people told me, like, you're going to hate your cover. You're just, everybody hates their cover. You're just going to hate it. I'm just going to give it to you. And you're going to be like, oh my God, this sucks. And I was like really thrilled when I saw this one, which came originally. The inside, I actually worked with a book designer in graduate school. Because people were telling me that I couldn't have two narratives on the page, I was like, well, I have to show that it's been done, and I have to make it look attractive as opposed to just kind of running my story through the printer twice. It looked really, shoddy before. So I worked with a book designer, and she said she was going to research kind of historical books to see if there had been something before. And so she looked at religious texts, because we're trying to create a spiritual experience on the page. And I wanted to have lots of white space where you could take a breath and kind of recreate the meditation experience. I thought that initially there should be all this information bombarding you. It's like when you travel or go into a different culture, you're initially just kind of overwhelmed, and it's just like you hear things and they don't make sense to you, and there are all these smells and sounds. So I thought initially you should be disoriented, and then you kind of find your way and figure out how to navigate. So I wanted to recreate that on the page. I really like to do kind of performative structure, and I think every story has the structure it wants, and it will determine it. And that's really one of the challenges of the author, to figure out the structure, the way to tell the story, and where to begin. And so I worked with her, and we looked at different spiritual texts, and she finally came up with the Talmud, which is an ancient Jewish text in which you have the scripture, and then you have commentary on the side. And so then we felt really free, like, oh, this has been done historically. And then she hand set 2 chapters herself, so they looked gorgeous. She had the old-fashioned printer, and we submitted those with the book proposal so the publishers could see how it looked. And they completely lifted her design. They just changed the font, but it's completely what she had done. And so that was one way of convincing people, like getting them to see my side. Once we made it look beautiful and they saw it could work on the page, they understood that. And then I sent them all these photographs from me, that my friends had taken during my ordination ceremony, me getting my head shaved and me ordaining, all that sort of stuff. I just sent them to them, and then we decided, well, maybe each chapter could have a photograph. And the publisher called me and said which one should be. So we just decided on the phone. Chapter 1 should have this photo, and then it's this one, this one, this one. So I had a lot of control. The only thing I didn't know is the cover, but this is in fact me. And they came up with this background. They said they wanted it to look really literary. And I don't know what that means, but I think it looks literary.
Yes.
The first draft they sent me, I looked white. And I was like, well, why do I look like a white man? And so they're like, ew. So then it came back and I looked like a Chinese man. And so I was like, let's up the brown, let's up the brown. And so finally I got kind of brown. And that was the only thing that we had to fight about. And then in the second one, they said paperback should be more narrative as opposed to literary. The minute you look at it, you should know that there's a story, okay, and kind of get a sense of what the story is. So it has to grab people faster because the paperback audience is less literary than the hardback audience. So this is what they told me. And I was like, but I love the cover. What can you do that's better? And they're like, trust me, you'll love it. And so then this came in the mail, and I was like, you're right, I love it. You know, and there's something implied there by me staring at the Buddha, ain't taking my calls. And so there's something there, which I think is interesting. Then they asked me to write a reader's guide at the back, and so that was the addition. And it occurred to me that I never explained why it's set up this way. So I talked about that in the reader's guide as well, like why it has 2 columns. Because the first one, you just open it up and kind of have to figure out what's going on. I hadn't explained it. And then the final thing they changed is the subtitle. The original subtitle is The Forest Journals of a Black Buddhist Nun. The new subtitle is An Inward Odyssey. That was a marketing thing. They thought, this one people were looking at and they're like, well, I'm not black. Well, I'm not Buddhist. Well, I'm not a nun. Just in my book. Whereas this one, An Inward Odyssey, is like completely confusing for everybody. Right? So, problem solved. No, they wanted to tap into the spirituality market. So that's what they thought that would be about. And I had to fight with them. I wanted different things. I was like, can't we sell this as a coming-of-age memoir? Can't we sell this as kind of like a crossover, just kind of American's tale? Can't we? And they're like, can we sell it as travel? They're like, no. So I didn't have any control with that. They said, you can give us, give us a list of subtitles. I gave them like 60 subtitles, and they're like, oh, we've got one, An Inward Odyssey. So I'm like, okay, do what you want. That battle I lost, but I had so much control over the physical look of the book. I figured I was luckier than many writers.
What things from the Buddhist religion have you taken into everyday life?
I think mindfulness is really, really key. Just kind of, I try to do mindfulness. Like the 19 hours wasn't that you were supposed to be sitting in meditation 19 hours a day, but meditation was kind of like working out for your mind. So you were trying to kind of focus. We just kind of focused on our breath, and you're just kind of aware of what you're doing. And you're just kind of trying to strive towards kind of more awareness and focus and eventually peace, and you'll develop kind of better characteristics and try to avoid anger, fear, greed, this sort of thing. But mindfulness was really key for me because I realized that I spent so much time like thinking about like my fascinating, glamorous life that was going to happen, or like rerunning things like, I should have said that to him, but I wasn't ever really kind of paying attention to where I was right now, kind of living there. And the goal of mindfulness is just to totally be aware of what you're doing, which is why they move so slowly. You're actually kind of breaking down your movements, like heel lifting, heel coming up, swinging, heel touching down. And so you're just, everything that you do becomes an exercise for kind of developing your mindfulness. So you're just aware of the present, and then when something happens, you don't react, but you act with intention. You kind of know what's going on. And so that was really key for me. I realized that I spent a lot of time just kind of reacting to fear, to kind of anger. And my anger is kind of sparked by fear. I'm afraid something's going to happen to me, so I get angry. I go on the offensive, like, you don't love me, well, I don't love you first. So I realized a lot of that, and the importance of being brave and just kind of being kind of aware of what you're doing. So now, like, people always ask me if I meditate and all that stuff. I say, no, not necessarily, but I try to be mindful in everything I do. So like, when I cook, when I do art projects, when I'm with friends, I just kind of try to be mindful, be aware of why I'm doing it, and it makes it kind of more joyful. Also the importance of breathing. I realize I can go for a long time without just kind of taking a deep breath to center myself, and that's very, very crucial. And just, yeah, the way I kind of approach my relationships with other people, there can be a spiritual component to it. It doesn't have to be about religion, but it can just be you're doing something, like you're spending time with quality people, with people who care about you and give you something back, who like recognize your dreams and want good things for you, as opposed to people who are kind of tearing you down or feel insecure. I think that's a kind of a spiritual way of taking care of yourself. So in that sense, I try to be more Buddhist, more mindful in just my ordinary activities. Does that answer your question?
Do you have a religion now?
I do. I mean, I was always raised Unitarian. I was raised Unitarian. And my mom raised me to kind of, you'll see about it in the book, there's this kind of funny section where my mom, like, we celebrated every single holiday. So, it's just as well we could. So, we'd, dress up like in our little costumes and like, celebrate every holiday from around the world, because my mom, that was part of my international upbringing, was to like learn about different religions. And then she kept on saying, when you're old enough, you can choose the religion you want. But there was never a spiritual component to it, so it was all kind of like cultural learning. So I wasn't really interested in religion. And everyone around me in my small town was like these born-again Christians who were like, you're going to hell. We're not going to hang out with you because we just learned in church camp that you're going to hell, and so we better not get too invested in you. So I was like, religion's bad. So I was like really kind of wounded about religion, which is also why this experience was so impactful for me, because then I realized that religion and spirituality aren't necessarily the same thing, and that the spiritual part of me was really hungry, that she hadn't been fed. I had this intellectual idea about religion, but I didn't have any spirituality that had fed me, and that I didn't have to be afraid of spirituality if I found one that fit for me. So then I became more interested in kind of Unitarianism, which is a more kind of a liberal faith where you use your intellect, you kind of work with a congregation as opposed to a priest who mediates God. And there's the belief that you can't really be free if anybody else is in bondage, so it kind of really unites you to other people. And so I became more interested in that, though I still believe a lot of Buddhist principles. But I also feel that there's a reason I named faith, and so I have to kind of, and faith doesn't feature in Buddhism, it features in Christianity, so I'm a little interested in that as well. But I'm still kind of working on it.
I'm going to have to come up there for the next question, because I want to get a list of books that are important to you.
Whenever asked this question, I just go blank. I was like, when I was applying for jobs, I actually wrote books on my hand because I knew that I would go completely blank and sound like an idiot, and I'd be like, I really do read.
Well, here's a cheat sheet. These are Martha Southgate's.
At first, when drinking coffee elsewhere, Z.Z. Packer was my roommate in graduate school.
Oh.
So I saw those books, those stories written over coffee in our kitchen.
Well, that's good.
So we'll leave that there.
Oh,
Oh man, you didn't warn me.
it doesn't
I
have
did
to
it
be a
like
list, it could be like 1 or 2,
At like 9:30. But I didn't.
These are the books
Everybody
that the girls
gets
are reading.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So, it doesn't have to be like, mind-blowing literature. It could be just things that you think are good writing, or books that are important to you now or have been in the past.
The book Running in the Family by Michael Ondaatje is the book that made me leave poetry and start writing nonfiction.
Running in the Family?
Running in the Family, yeah. It's a family memoir where he goes back to Sri Lanka after years of living in Canada and starts collecting family stories. There are poems, there are family stories, there's photographs of his kind of crazy family. There are explorer journals. It just has a lot of different genre stuff in it that helped me make the transition.
Did I spell that right?
Yeah, he's the one who wrote The English Patient, which became a big romantic movie.
And Cinema Peeler is his book of poetry.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, for me, all the books by Chinua Achebe are really important.
Things Fall Apart,
No
Broken
Reviews,
Arrow.
yeah, all that
I
stuff.
just read
He's a classmate and a good friend of my father's. They grew up together. And so before I met my father, I kind of read Achebe to be kind of parented by him. But there are this whole new generation of Nigerian writers who are really interesting. Purple Hibiscus is a really lovely book. by a girl who went to school with my younger sister, a Nigerian girl, and it's about being raised by a kind of an abusive evangelical father, and then kind of finding this aunt who kind of awakens her mind to possibilities of literature and all this sort of thing. And the last name is Adichie, Adichie. And a young girl, the girl who wrote it is like very.
I think she's maybe 27 now.
Yeah, she's 27 now.
Yeah.
Same age as my sister. Yeah. Graceland is written by a young Nigerian. It's about a Nigerian Elvis impersonator right up in the slums of Nigeria. Abani, A-B-A-N-I.
And he will be participating in our International Literary Festival.
Oh, okay.
So ladies, you'll clear your schedules for April.
Chris Abani. Yeah. What else? What's it called? That Night. It's a novella by Alice McDermott. Just this tiny, slim little, it reads almost like a poem. About life in the suburbs, I'm gonna say. It happens around one night where this girl who's become pregnant is being sent away to a home for she's been sent away to a home for unwed mothers, and her boyfriend, who's kind of like the street tough, comes to, he doesn't know why she's disappeared. He thinks that she doesn't love him anymore, so he's come to look for her. And I just use it stylistically. The language is just so interesting. It's the mood, the kind of the longing, the end of summer, the kind of. It's told in the voice of the 10-year-old girl who always admired her and lived next door, and it's kind of seeing these adult emotions for the first time through watching these people. And it really kind of helped me capture what life might have been like for my mom, being thrown out of her family and being in this home for unwed mothers. I was trying to figure that out. Is that enough?
That's enough. That's good. That's a lot. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And before we finish, I did want to go back to ZZ Packer and you and your pot of coffee and ask.
Oh, I have another one.
Oh,
Sorry.
go.
Persepolis.
Oh.
That's,
On that one?
yeah.
It's a graphic memoir, so it's like comic books about a young girl who comes of age in Iran, Satrapi, during the Iranian Revolution.
S-A-T-R-A-P-I. Yeah.
R-A-P-N.
And then there's a sequel, and then I just saw
Yeah.
in the bookstore the other day, she also has come out with a new book. I don't know if it's a memoir, but it's a graphic novel.
Yeah, she's from this wild family. She's I think her family were the emperors of Iran, and then they're very kind of liberal, kind of Marxist. And then when the Shah comes in and starts this Islamic revolution, she's 10 and trying to figure it out. And she's got these stark kind of black and white kind of comic things where she's very interested in God. She speaks to God, and kind of trying to figure out what she's supposed to do. Eventually, her family sends her away, sends her out of the country, so she doesn't have to live under the Islamic rules. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I just wanted for you to tell us what happens at an MFA program. What is it? What happens? What happens in the classroom? What happens at your desk, out of class? What happens, I don't know, in the coffee houses? What happens when you go to a writing school?
You don't want to know what happens out of the classroom. There's a lot of time wasted in bars. I went to Iowa, and that program is known, Zizi and I went to Iowa, and that program is known for just really being about the workshop. It's called the Iowa Writers Workshop, and so you don't take many other classes. I teach at an MFA program now in Pittsburgh, where you have to take regular classes about literature and this sort of thing, but the workshop where you get together and you share each other's work and you tear it apart and you give it critique and that sort of thing, that's really the focus in Iowa, and that's really all you do. They just clear the slate. The idea is you're really serious about a manuscript, you want to graduate with a book, and so you don't have to take other classes at Iowa. You just get together, and there are 12 people. You have one workshop leader for the semester, and 12 people in that class, and each week 2 people put out stories. They put up stories, they give stories for you to read, and they're, ZZ's stories, we critique them one week, a few weeks later they're in the New Yorker. So, really high quality stuff, kind of terrifying. So you're supposed to read it, write comments on it, and then have a, maybe a 1 to 2 page critique. And then you come to class and you just discuss it, and what the issues are, what the writer wants, what's motivating the story, all that sort of thing. And the instructor's in there to a certain degree. And so that's pretty much what we do. And then afterwards, go out to a bar. If you've been workshopped, you'll like cry. People will be like, oh, they were too rough on you, but I think you're brilliant, whatever. So there's a lot of that, and then there's a lot of, and people are really serious, and it's a very intense program. So people just like write all day, and then come to the bar at night and be like, oh, I wrote this many pages, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm reading this. So there's a lot of kind of high energy stuff. In the program I teach, you would also go to classes. So you would be taking regular literature courses and kind of looking at literature. Writing papers about literature, and then doing your own stuff as well. And then we have classes that are literature classes for writers. So like me, I teach like a class on travel writing. If you're interested in travel writing, we'd read great travel writing literature, and then we'd also workshop each other's stuff, own writings about it. Or I teach like how to write an essay that has like a political or spiritual mission to it. And so we'd read other stuff like that, and then people would write their own. So, or you would just study the literature and figure out how are contemporary writers doing it, what are the tools that they're using.
How do you deal with the competition? Because it is, isn't writing, I always think of it as being a competitive profession, and yeah, it's very personal at the same time, and especially when you're younger, not anything mature. How do you deal with the competition?
Well, some people don't deal with it very well. Like our program at Pittsburgh, we kind of pride ourselves on not being that competitive, but being really supportive of people reading your work and saying, oh, I think you should be reading so-and-so, and I read your stuff. And people can really be real supportive with you about it. And you're working on a manuscript, you'd work with an advisor one-on-one on finishing this manuscript, and you have 3 people who would read your manuscript and help you. And you get a lot of support from people in the classroom. Iowa is known for being competitive, so it's, it's more like, people were kind of worried, but it also kind of pushed you to put your best work. You just work for weeks and weeks and weeks, 10 drafts before you turn your story in, because you didn't want people to be able to tear it apart or say stuff about it, so it really kind of upped the ante. But it did get hard, like when you're trying to get funding, or if like an editor or a publisher comes to town, because there are all these meetings where you can start to network and get an agent, get a publisher, this sort of thing. It's preparing you for the professional world of being a writer as well. And so people kind of get funky and competitive about that, but you usually find a couple of people who really like your work and who can help you and just support you and stuff. So I don't know, does that make sense? Is it too vague at this point? So it's a great opportunity because your job is to write, so it's really kind of wonderful. But I think the people who are most successful are people who've actually been out in the world a little bit, have been writing or have been traveling or working or something, and then they know what book they want to work on. Because if you just come straight out of school, straight out of college, and you're like in this writing program, there's all this pressure, and what if you don't have anything to write? So people get really freaked out, and those are the people who spend all their time in the bars. So people who've been elsewhere, and they're like, I've got a book project, and it'll be great because I won't have to be doing this god-awful word processing job during the day and trying to write at night. They love that time to just come and just focus on their manuscript, and you can do a lot of. For me, I discovered I could do a lot of the riskier work, kind of figuring out the voice and the things that were harder to write, because I didn't have to stop and kind of attend to other business. I could just focus on the writing and get feedback from people really quickly, so your work can progress really fast. But I think you have to be very clear on kind of what your voice is and why you're there, so you don't get influenced by people. Because in the workshop, you can get 12 differing points of view from people. Like, this part's great, that's the worst part, take it out, I really like the voice, your voice sucks, and you're like, what do I do? So you have to kind of have a clear sense of how to navigate that. It's great to have feedback, but if you get all this conflicting stuff, you don't want to have a breakdown, you want to figure out how to use that to your advantage.
Will you sign our books?
I would love to sign your books. Thanks for your questions, those are great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody make a line. You're getting your little name tag thing.
Oh, that's the one that you have already.
Yeah.
fine, whichever one.
Okay, so I don't have to take two.
Oh, I like it here.
And my first one.
No, I hadn't seen anyone eating it. I thought you were rolling it. Take something up or
Is it mixed?
something.
I don't think so.
I'm just gonna like
It's like banana.
She has the other one that I gave her.
Sure.
I like it.
You're eating it, you don't know what it is?
I dab it. It's not banana.
It's not banana.
You're like, that's
Do you not remember that, or should I say the word?
It doesn't matter to me. I just love his face. It's fun.
Yeah, because I love it. I told you I have a thing for food science. Didn't I say that? I told you.
I actually really prefer
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna sit there.
You're very
You're going to start reading. So who am I meeting? Is it class?
Why are we trying to do this?
And my aunt got so enthusiastic about it, I know, but she
That's okay. It doesn't have to be that.
No, she's already got some. Okay, show. Because we all like this. I know what happens next.
Yeah, I would've- hopefully I would have known that.
So
Nonsense varieties really
I did
good.
find loopholes though. I don't have shit.
That's
But I don't have both. Besides that, I'm cooking everything. Because my mother can
No
cook everything.
disclaimers, no disclaimers. Ever.
Chinese food technically.
And your nonsense.
Well, it's takeaway.
It is takeout.
That's all right. That's the first
I
Oh, that's like.
I didn't do paragraphs. I wrote first sort of thing that I wrote. This is the original. Because I'm never from here.
No, I'm usually a good
It's all in, yeah, it's sort of,
meals.
and
But my
yeah,
actually my feet are always cold. I
Yeah.
guess because you're not supposed to be here. I'm here. It gets cold.
Oh, really?
And I really like how you changed it. Like, because I felt like the first way was like a somewhat well-known story. And this took that cliche and made it something else that I really loved.
Anyone else?
I think it had a really good voice, at least it wasn't just, description and then gone, I think it all came together well.
I agree, I think the resolution was very, very good, and it was only 100 words. Why the format?
I liked it.
Jennifer. Let's start here.
It's called Spotlight. It was a dark and stormy night. Rain was pouring down onto the earth and onto Chelsea as it always did. Chelsea had just finished working, cleaning after all the pigs in the office. She walks down 58 and 20th and catches a shadow following her. Her heart starts to race and she begins to walk faster. The faster she walks, the faster the shadow follows her. She turns around and realizes that the shadow following her is her own. She also acknowledges that all these years the only thing that has ever stopped her was herself. Suddenly the rain ceases and the sun comes out and shines down at Melissa, shining so brightly like it never has before.
What do you think? What do you think?
Okay, great.
You don't know?
Like, I think I need more description
Of
of like, I don't know, her life.
why do you think that?
Because like, I'm trying to show like a girl who's been like through so much stuff and at the end her life gets better. But I couldn't like describe it.
So here's the the interesting thing. If you know you have 100 words to use, right? What kind of stories do you want to think of? I'm sorry. I think she's looking for the key and Stacey's gone. Sorry. So I didn't know what you said.
Short stories.
Yeah, but short stories, that's a general genre. I mean, how can you show that a lot has happened to this girl and get some resolution in just 100 words? Or is that the kind of thing that you think you can achieve in a book?
That's what I was trying to.
I think you did a really good job of it though, because
but you got in like a very good position. So I think you didn't have to really add more.
I think the shadow in and of itself symbolizes the things that might have happened to her and the fact that they keep chasing her down. Is that what you were trying to say? And I think that they might also have been her past and how she couldn't escape it, and then she figured out that, oh, I can't do something about this.
I love that one of the stories starts out with kind of a cliche beginning like yours. It was a dark and stormy night because it's been used so many times, but it never goes the same way twice. So I like stories that start with a cliche, so I like that.
Put that on board. That is a bad cliche. Did you have something? So, I'm going to ask you again, do you think you succeeded?
I think so.
Good. That's all I want you to say. Everyone got what you were trying to do, and they got your metaphor of the shadows, so that's really good. Who didn't go?
Did Jessica go?
I'm sorry?
Did Jessica go?
Did you? She didn't bring. She has her new story.
All is fair. War, overcast in the trenches. Soldier among broken blades of grass. Detonation, comfortable world in disarray. Leg long lost. Hospital bed, early dismissal. War, 5 years later, all is fair. Sticks and stones, the persistence of loss. Always a cripple, never a hero. In dreams, smoke, flames, limbs in midair. Death in bottles, uppers, downers, downward spiral. Love, the aftermath, all is fair. Wife and child. In a bedside photo, otherwise long gone. Overdose, 30, early age. Blue in the face, closed coffin, flat droop. Veteran cemetery, what a shame. Soldier shed his defect. Toddler shattered, mother torn, all is fair.
I thought that was brilliant for these two reasons. So, what Renee did in her very short story is take cliches and reintroduce them in a new way. And so the language is wonderful because the cliche is so familiar in your head, so you kind of feel like you know it, but then you get a completely different definition. So these are the two cliches. Does anyone remember, I'm sorry, I should phone the name. Does anyone remember in the story how they changed? It was quick, it was quick reading.
I felt like those things weren't there, but were unfair. And then it was like all is fair, and then she described war, and all is fair, and she described love, fight, death, and war.
And I'm gonna sorry.
Oh,
she's
yeah,
in
I
the
think
back.
she's in the back.
And what about this one? I thought this was really, really good. No one saw this? No one saw this? Did you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I hope you saw
Always
it.
a cripple, never a hero.
Always a cripple, never a hero. That's lovely. That's really great. I mean, because it's so, there's such agreement with that. I mean, it's like perfect agreement between this cliche and her new statement. And so this is what I meant when we had the conversation originally about cliches and trying to think about things that are so ordinary. I mean, this one's really old. This is Shakespeare. And so just to think about things that you hear all of the time, and especially in movies, you know, because we're such a visual culture, and movies are so cliche, like just, you know, reels and reels and reels of cliche. And to just think about them in a new way. I mean, because you've got all the material lying there. And Jennifer kind of did that too with the Dark and Stormy Night. That's why I wrote it up here, because this is the cliche of how to begin a story. Like everyone knows this is Dark and Stormy. And you see spoofs in like cartoons where you're growing up on this story. So yes, all of those kind of things. So I think you did a really, really good job because of those simple things that you did. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I was in one of the most turbulent moments of my life. The fever of the pain was too much.
The ceiling above me was a white veil to me, and the old physician came and went uselessly, nor remedies, no cure. And in my visions the room, each time I heaved a breath, became weathered and weathered. And I, desperate, tried to yell, but my mouth was still closed. In a blink of an eye, a masked figure was in front of me, and panic aboard me. What a coward it was! The figure slid beside me and took my breath away. It covered me with its black robes, and terribly, disgustingly, it sneered at me. It sneered. Then as soon as it came, it disappeared, and I was there.
Can I see it? I want to read it again.
From my cover.
That's okay. I'll touch it. Oh, I was in one of the most delirious moments of my life. The fever and the pain were too much. The ceiling above me was a white veil to me, and the old physician came and went uselessly. No remedies, no cure. And in my visions, the room, each time a heaved breath came, redder and redder. And I desperately tried to yell, but my mouth was still closed. In a blink of an eye, a masked figure was in front of me, and panic devoured me. What a coward I was. The figure slipped beside me and took my breath away. It covered me with its black robes, and terribly, disgustingly, it sneered at me. It sneered. Then, as soon as it had come, it disappeared, and I was spared. And I was spared. What do you think?
I was feeling.
Why?
I don't know, because I would like to write about dark things like.
I just ask you to forgive me if I make mistakes in my English language, because it is more than 40 years ago that I learned it at school. So I had to refresh it when I came to America. Before I came here, I went to school again for 2 months to refresh my English, so I hope it's okay. First, I want to tell you to give you some information about the background of the story, so that you can understand what I read. In Rwanda, a very small country in the heart of Africa, there live three tribes. The Hutu tribe, to which 80% of the people belong, the Tutsi tribe, 12%, and the Twa, 2%. And until the beginning of this 1960, the Tutsi tribe ruled the country, the minority ruled the country in a dynasty. But then there was a Hutu uprising, and after that, the persecution and the killing of Tutsi began. It was in 1962. So I said that Rwanda is a very small country, and it is looking quite different from how we used to imagine African countries. It's a mostly green land with many small hills, therefore called the country of the thousand hills. A very beautiful land, which in former days even began to open to tourism. But then, in 1994, the unconceivable happened. A second genocide after the annihilation of the Jewish people in Europe, caused by the Nazi government of my own country. Almost 1 million dead in only 100 days. All of them murdered, not killed in war. Civilians, men, women and children as well, killed by civilians, murdered by hand, with axes, clubs, and machetes. And the world looked on or away. Many of young survivors afterwards left their country, and 5 of them have become part of my family. Let me say I have a very big family. My husband, a pediatrician, and I, we took children into our family which came into our country as refugees and needed a new home. So 5 of them came from Rwanda, lost their families there. Jan, one of them, just from the very beginning started to tell. I listened to her again and again, and finally, after 4 years of listening and talking about her experiences, I began to write her story as a novel, which has now also been published in the USA. The novel has 3 parts. The first one tells the story of Jan's family before the genocide, when they lived in a beautiful house on a hill, father, mother, and 3 children who spent a quite normal life together, not so different from ours. The parents, Florence and Anani, both were teachers. Jeanne, at that time 6 years old, went to school, fought with her little sister Thea, and teased her brother Jean-Do, who was 3 years older. They spent their holidays in the countryside, visiting their grandmother together with all the other members of the big family, their cousins and aunts. The children's life seemed to be well protected. The second part of the novel tells about the 100 days when 1994, after seconds later, a gang of teenagers broke through the bamboo stalks. There were 6 or 7 young men, among them also 2 boys, hardly older than Jean-Do. "We got them!" cried one. Jeanne automatically thought of the street boys who had often washed her father's motorcycle, but they'd been armed with polishing cloth, not with axes and machetes. Jeanne put her arms around her laugh. As she did so, her eyes fell on Singiro, her family former houseboy, who, though he held himself a little away from the others, looked just as grim and determined as his half-grown buddies. Jeanne had never seen him again since Florence had let him go. He'd grown quite fat. His unexpected reappearance in this place loosed a rage in her that was even stronger than her fear. She could have flown at him. What did he think he was doing, threatening them? Certainly, he wanted to give revenge. Now one of the boys walked up to Anani and spat in front of him. He was obviously the oldest and the leader of the gang. "Well, how do you feel now, Professor?" he sneered. Jeanne's indignation grew. How dared this fellow speak to her father so disrespectfully? "Without your beautiful house and your motorcycle," he continued spitefully, "now you don't have anything anymore. Who do you think is riding your motorcycle now?" Jeanne threw an angry look at Singiro. "But you know us, you worked for us, so what do you want from us?" she burst out at him. The leader answered in Singiro's place. "Well, what else would we want? The money you have on you, so hand it over." "I've nothing," Anani declared. "Then your shoes, for all I care, or your shirt, Professor." He waved his machete unmistakably. "If you have nothing to offer, we will kill you." Anani pulled a bundle of money out of his pocket and handed it to them. "Well now, There you were lucky again. The leader waved the notes triumphantly and then pointed to the young man on the ground. Is that one there one of you? Immediately Anani answered the question in the affirmative. But then Sindhiro chimed in. I know the family very well, he growled. That one has nothing to do with them at all. He barely had the words out when they all stepped forward as if on command and pecked on the man on the ground. Jan buried her head in her arms. She only lifted it again when she heard, "You're finished here." The young murderers grabbed their victim by feet and dragged his body away behind them. They retreated, bawling out the glory of their exploit. John tried not to look at the place where the body of the murdered man had crushed down the reed. Slowly the dust crept through the grasses in the field. It brought cool night air with it, and a little later voices again, which approached from far off. Then the crackling of the grasses under firm steps provided Jan with the certainty that the next troop was on its way toward them, led by the tracks of the others. A group of teenagers pushed the reeds aside and stood in a semicircle. Civilians this time too, but fitted out with everything they needed to kill. One just like the other, interchangeable, strong with power, driven by greed. Because Anani had no more money left, they took his shoes, his rich watch, also his plastic ballpoint pen, and his glasses case. They also wanted his glasses. That was too much. Jan couldn't contain herself anymore. She protested. My father can't see anything without glasses. What do you want with his glasses anyway? Please, don't take his glasses. This time she pleaded. It had its effect. They withdrew and left Anani his glasses. After they were gone, Jan listened tensely and waited.
Was able to do this thing, it really, I was able to kind of find myself again. I got a sense of my identity, all that pressure that I felt in America for being poor, for, having grown up on welfare, for, not having a dad, for being black, a woman, all that pressure, all that stuff that had been put on me, I was able to kind of overcome that and get a real strong sense of myself. So it was really, really important for me. And then from there, I learned that you can do stuff that you're afraid to do. You can go places where you don't know anyone, where you don't speak the language, you don't know the culture, where you think you might fail, and you can succeed. And so it really encouraged me to try new things and to risk and to do stuff even if I was afraid of it. So it was a really important moment for me. And I probably, after I came back from that, then I went to Nigeria and found my father and my brothers and sisters, and I probably wouldn't have had the guts to do it if I hadn't done this thing in Thailand first. So, that answers your question? Oh, you had.
What inspired you to become a Buddhist nun?
He wants to know what inspired me to become a Buddhist nun. It was kind of a fluke. I hadn't really thought about it, but because I was in Thailand after flunking out of college, and I really liked Thailand, and I found it really a fascinating place, which is very, very interesting. And I started talking to Buddhist nuns because people just put them down, and they would just be like, nobody's a nun, nobody pays attention to nuns, who cares? And so that made me really interested because I'm stubborn like that. So if you tell me I shouldn't be studying something, I've got to study it. So I was talking to these women, and they just all, I would ask them, why would you be a nun? Because you're like poor, you're living in the worst part of the temple, you're acting as a servant to monks, people look down on you, like you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, why would you be a nun? And all these women said, I've never been more free. And they would just smile, and they just look so happy and peaceful, and I was really interested in that. What is freedom? It seemed like a different way from I was using freedom, because I could travel and go places, and I didn't feel free. And so I was really interested in kind of learning what it is they knew that I didn't know. And when I was also thinking about it, I thought I would just study them. My advisor in the book, John Boone, says you can't really write about someone unless you experience their life. If you have to walk a mile in their shoes, you have to risk something. So you're not going to be able to tell the world what they're getting from being nuns unless you've tried it yourself. So he kept on saying, to be a real, authentic writer, you've got to try something yourself, and you've got to risk the same things that they did. So those two combined made me decide to try it. That was the goal. First day it was 15 minutes. It was very simple meditation. It's called insight meditation. All you do is you focus on your breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Maybe your diaphragm, expanding and contracting. And just kind of trying to have like very kind of full, deep, calming breaths. And then things as they occur to you become part of the meditation. So you don't have to stress out about the fact that your mind is wandering. You can just be like in, out, mind wandering, hearing noise, wishing I could get the hell out of here, wish I had some cookies, in, out, legs hurt, want to stop, in, out. I wonder what's happening on the Brady Bunch, mind coming back, in, out. So it's just anything around you becomes part of the meditation. And you don't have to say like, oh, it's wrong to think about that. You just incorporate that, and then you notice your mind wanders, but it always comes back. Distractions arise, then they go away. Discomfort arises, it goes away. And eventually you're just going back to the breath, and then things start to happen in the meditation. So you might get some insights about something that happened before. You might relive an experience that made you angry or made you scared. You'll see it, and you'll see it in a different way then. I got a lot of kind of childhood flashbacks. At one point, my grandmother, who had passed, came and visited me. And I was able to ask her, how she was doing. And so all this stuff happens. So your mind is very active. You think you're just going to be blissed out. And I was like, I don't want to meditate. Like, how peaceful can someone be? Like, how much peace do you need in a given day? But your mind is actually very, very active, doing different things. And then you become much better at it. It's kind of just like working out at the gym. You're working out with your mind, so you're able to like focus, be more peaceful, slow your heart rate. Eventually kind of have out-of-body experiences. So there's a lot going on. And I tried to write about that in the margins of the book, kind of keep that experience going.
I was wondering, like, someone that traveled so many places, and then had a lot of experiences, and as you said, most of them changed your life completely. Why would you choose, like, places like Pittsburgh back in your home country to stay in?
That's a good question. Why did I choose to come back? Well, it was partially because my father's sick, and I thought, it's great kind of traveling around the world and not worrying about money and just kind of living like this, but my father's really old and he's sick, and if I need to be able to fly him from Nigeria to the States for medical attention, I need to be a grown-up, which means I need a job with health insurance and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much why I did it. If not for that, I would still be, traveling.
It's funny though, like, think about it, the place you were running from in the first place, that's where you were running from, now you're back there with your own choice.
Right. And I think that's often what the case is. I mean, I think
The moral?
The moral, yes,
That's
the moral of the story is that often you set out from home, you encounter all sorts of obstacles on the path, you grow, you challenge, and you come back home. And it's different because you've changed. But yeah, I think oftentimes what you're looking for is really here. Coming home is like the biggest journey of all, I think. Yeah.
That's it, relief and release. Do you have any other questions?
If that doesn't happen to me, I can't do that. I can't let something bother me and just, it's okay, I'm alright about it. No, it bothers me. It's just upsetting. Like, I don't know. Like, I write, but I write.
Is that what writing is?
No, it's just, I don't know.
You're gonna cry anyway. There's a great poet, she died, her name's Audre Lorde. She has a poem called Litany for Survival, right? In the end of the poem, she says, when we are silent, it doesn't go away. I still get scared getting up in front of a microphone. I've performed in front of hundreds of thousands of people. To these people, okay? I still get scared, but I would be scared sitting in my apartment not doing anything.
Hey, let's do that.
Yeah, right?
Remember I said that before she George spoke, I didn't know what to do.
Listen to you. I've always believed that horrors can seal the mouth. And not only the mouth, but also the heart and mind, at least for a long time. That there are horrors that let all stories die, because the words refuse to come. But you wanted to tell me, and with me or through me others too. I'm going to listen to you, as I have several times already. I'm going to try to conceive of the unconceivable and see what happens to me. When it comes to the point, I may cry for help, as loudly as you did. Or did you not cry out? You will tell me. We will put our words together and I will write them down. Perhaps it's even true that once a thing is contained in words, it leaves us, or turns into something from which we are able to take a step backward. If we succeed, perhaps your pain, embedded in a hole, may be put to rest. Whenever I try to imagine the extent of your pain, I can find no dimension that makes it conceivable for me. And so I'm also afraid of what we are attempting. But you trust me, and I you. I firmly believe in your strength. There was a time before, there will be a time after. Let us build a bridge that will carry us over the unbearable. I'm certain that as we walk back and forth, we will find love on both sides. One day, at the beginning of the ordained daily nap, Jeanne escaped from the house and climbed her favorite tree, the amapera, which grew very close to the fencing of the back courtyard. Concealed among the dense leaves, she accidentally came to overhear her mother and a friend discussing political unrest in Rwanda and news about persecution of Tutsis. Though she didn't understand the sense of what they were talking about, the conversation left her depressed and unusually quiet for a long time. Jeanne was still depressed when, toward 6, she and Thea joined her mother in the courtyard. Florence sat on the little low wall that separated the terrace from the courtyard. In her usual fashion, she was braiding her hair for the night. Meanwhile, she was waiting for the girls for a lesson, reading glasses on her nose, books piled beside her. And now, finally, at the sight of the familiar scene,